AI large language models would replace the need for community managers.
What kind of communities are right now progressing the most?
Communities that have set as a baseline an expectation of contribution,
Right.
I think are more likely to succeed.
What are the three best companies, according to you, which have cracked the code of building amazing communities? We all know that the world is getting smaller, but building across isn't getting any easier. Founders Across Borders was born out of this simple insight that ideas travel fast, but people, they are always built differently, they speak differently, and each one of us leads differently. And to celebrate the oneness of community, leading, and embracing the nuances of leadership, we are joined by the wonderful person, Mr. Todd Nilson. He has been the founder of Community Consultants Collective, which is a not for profit organization. He has also been a founder and community strategist at Clock Tower Advisors, and he has been in the industry for more than 3.5 decades, starting his journey into technology, leading into community, and now telling people that why community is the center and the revenue generating engine for your business. Thank you so much, Todd, for joining us. It's a pleasure speaking with you today.
I was honored to be invited, Yukta. So great to see you again. Wow, I feel old, 30 years. No, in
Oh,
seriousness, it doesn't feel like it was that long. And I think talking to people who are always coming in with bright ideas and kindness in their heart and a desire to learn keeps me feeling young and energized, within the work that we do.
thank you for that. And it's more about the experience and expertise that you always bring on table. Like from building an organization, like once you build something, every time now you know how are the fundamentals and you can build something once again from scratch. So how was it when you were starting out to build your first agency or your first business? What were the three things that you were focused on when you started that out?
So when I started Clock Tower Advisors back in almost 10 years ago now, August of 2015, my goals were to establish more independence and freedom for myself,
Hmm.
to see if I could apply the lessons of consulting that I had from working for many years for IT and community consulting
Right.
organizations, agencies, and to really establish or stake out my own thoughts and feelings about what it
Hmm.
is to build online communities.
So, what is the future of communities? I mean, now we are seeing that the technological advancements in AI, in Web3, VR space, everything is dynamically changing. I think we are in that phase where in every 20 years a revolution takes place. So, I believe that this is the decade of that revolution, wherein probably in 2030, even if we have flying cars, I won't be surprised now.
I'm holding out for the jetpack personally, but the flying car would be cool too. I mean, you're right. I think it's very easy to become dazzled and overwhelmed by the technological changes that we're going through. But you're right to point out
Right.
that we're always going through these. It's cyclical.
Hmm.
I because of the amount of time that I've spent in my career, I've seen people being dismissive of the internet, of email, of e-commerce, of social media, and now of AI and the tools that are there. There are always naysayers in the space. I think
Yeah.
that the appropriate way to think about this and the future of community building is to recognize that you need to embrace these tools with curiosity
Hmm.
and with the maturity to not, to not think like this is going to be the end of the world, because it probably won't be. And an understanding that, hey, this is something that may actually help us with the things that we do. And so I think that when AI tools, first came on the scene, not to make
Yeah.
this entirely a conversation about that, because I think you're asking a
Right.
broader question about the
Yeah.
future of communities. I think that there were questions about whether AI large language models would replace the need for community managers or even
Yeah.
online communities as a whole. And I think that we're slowly getting I've been amazed at how fast we've sort of progressed in our thinking around this. Like, I think that most people now have taken a beat and recognized, like, okay, it's maybe not going to take my job. It is going to have an impact on my job,
Yeah.
on the things that I do. And now, like, how do we integrate it in ways that makes our job as organizers, facilitators, builders of communities and online spaces easier to manage? And so I find it kind of inspiring to see where we are with community building at this time. I think that the ability to build online communities has become further democratized. And what I mean by
Hmm.
that is that it's there's less friction than ever if you
Right.
want to provision an online community space. There's more choice than ever if you
Hmm.
want to set up those kinds of spaces. And so you don't need to be a large enterprise anymore to do it.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a deeply technical person to do it, because I
Yeah.
remember back when, if you wanted to implement a discussion forum for your
Hmm.
hobby, that you needed to know a little bit something about coding and hosting applications. That's just not needed anymore. So I think that the future of community is bright, and
It's
I'm happy
bright.
to go on more about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I have been building communities for like the past 6 years now. I didn't know that it's a thing until unless I was introduced that, okay, this is an industry as well. But I used to do it for fun. And I didn't know that, okay, these are the people qualities that you can leverage, or these are the things that you could do. And I'm like, "Oh, this is how it works, or this is how things are done." And I could see that when people find a space wherein they feel belonged, or they could resonate with a higher purpose, that's when they start attaching to the practices of the community or start collaborating more effectively. What are your thoughts? What builds a community? Because there are so many communities, and I don't want to say numbers, but I'd say 65 to 70% of them, if they're free communities, are dead communities. Like people would just sign up, but they won't interact, and it's like one another space for them now.
Yes, I mean, there's got to be a compelling reason for them to be there. That they're able to get something there that they can't get elsewhere. So I'll talk a little bit about the flip side of the coin that I was mentioning earlier. That the friction of creating new spaces online for people to integrate and collaborate and meet with each other is easier than it has ever been. The technological barriers are practically zero to doing that. I could start up a free Slack, or I could spin up a Discord or a discourse or a circle or a Mighty Networks, like the if you can absorb a little bit of cost easier than ever. I could start up a platform this afternoon within an hour and make a few basic configurations and open it up as a community. But the flip side of that coin is, without planning, without intentionality, without ensuring that you're offering something real that people want, it's easy for them to not engage. And especially if you're not, like, I think one of the things that we've become more sophisticated about in the past few years, with like really brilliant people like Bree Lever and Kristen Pavel, and there are many others. I feel like I'd do an injustice if I tried to name them all, because there are a lot of smarter people than me, that know about monetizing online communities, and I think sort of that impulse to do that is a promise of value to people to join. Like, if I'm going to reach into my pocket and pull out money to pay to be a part of that community, I'm more likely to want to be an active participant in that space. I do think that free online communities can absolutely work if you have strongly aligned the value of that community to people that need it. And I'm not a big believer in huge numbers of people in the communities that we build. There's plenty of big social media platforms for that. Like, we build cozier, more sustainable communities. And, I'm perfectly happy in a community of 100, 200, 250 people,
Right.
as much as I am, working with large enterprises that maybe have, a million plus users. But as long as the purpose and the value aligns with the needs of those members, that's what happens. The other thing, very quickly, I'm going to mention with this is,
Hmm.
the other consideration is, because it's so easy to join these communities,
Right.
and because many of them are free, I think that a lot of people will have a tendency to join something to say, well, I'll just kind of see what it's about. And then they come
Hmm.
there once, and then they don't come back again.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we all like, and I feel this particularly with people that are in our professional practice as
Yeah.
community people. We're joining more than our fair share of those online community spaces and not really participating ourselves, because we're just too busy. There's too many things pulling at our attention.
Absolutely, yes. And With that being said, it's difficult to identify what to join, what not to join. Specifically, if you're a founder, and there are so many founder led communities, you can say BNI. There are, like now in San Francisco, there's ODF, where you can just join, talk about pitches. There are VC communities. So, how do you identify which one is the best fit for you and which one would generate the most ROI in terms of investing, whether that be money or time? For people, those who are valuing their time more, of course, I'd say time efficient.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you want to do. I mean, for
Hmm.
me as a business owner and entrepreneur, I put almost all of my energy, my free time energy, in other words, for communities that I'm not actively working as a strategist or an operations person for, I put all of my energy into three distinct community spaces. One
Okay.
is what you mentioned at the outset, the Community Consultants Collective, which
Right.
is for other independent or agency based community professionals like you and I. Another is the Fractionals United community
Hmm.
for fractional professionals. So people that will work as basically a part-time chief operations officer or chief financial officer or revenue officer.
Right.
I'm there as a chief community officer
Hmm.
fractionally. And that's part of how I've gone to market over the past couple of years. And
Yeah.
so I find it highly valuable to be in that space because I get to interact with others who are at that C level
Hmm.
who may be in a position to bring me in on a project that makes sense to do. And I can give back to that community. And I do give back to the community as a pro bono advisor to
Yeah.
help Karina that runs that space do it effectively. And then the third community that I'm a part of, which again for very similar ROI reasons, is called the Connective. That's
Okay.
another, both incidentally, both Fractionals United and the Connective are paid
Right.
community experiences. But the Connective is great because they are a chapter based virtual organization
Okay.
that is set up to actually have like a paid referral process.
Hmm.
Like they have a platform that they're working on called Nolodex,
Hmm.
which works like kind of like a social CRM, I would almost call it. So you connect with others within the Connective, and
Okay.
if they give you a referral that results in business, you're basically set up in your profile to give a percentage of what you make on that back to the person who's the referrer. So there is a strong extrinsic motivator to make introductions to others so that
Right.
they can benefit from it. Those three places are extremely good ROI for me. And again, I can only offer this from a personal perspective
Right.
because I'm more deeply connecting with my fellow consultants, and I have some very personal reasons for that I'll get into in our conversation, I'm sure. The other two organizations are just super effective for me for business lead development. Like I am not a cold
Right.
outreach guy. I don't love, I don't love all the messages I get inundated with on LinkedIn every day by people who want to sell me their SEO services or want to build a custom mobile app for me. And I'm in no way, shape, or form someone who's going to hire them, to do that
Right.
work. However, it's like I'm not going to do that myself to someone else. I don't appreciate that. However, what I have found is that relationship building, what I think comes natural to me from the years that I spent working as a
Yeah.
technology recruiter, folds really well into that. And so, like, I've gotten a lot more value and a lot more business development out of those networks than I have elsewhere.
I think that does make a lot of sense since you've mentioned that you know that which community is giving you the most value, and based on that, you are ensuring that you join that kind of community. And the people are also out there to provide value. And this also brings me to a point to understand the human intrinsic nature initially is that I should be benefited. But the service based nature goes like provide service first, that is, provide value first, and you would be benefited automatically as a result of the deeds that you have done. So, what do you think based on this system? What kind of communities are right now progressing the most?
I mean, I'll speak generally about it. I think that to boil down, what you were saying to what I see as its essence is you give to get, right?
Yeah.
That communities that have set as a baseline an expectation of contribution,
Right.
I think are more likely to succeed. So one of the things that I think has worked best with, for example, the Fractionals United community that
Yeah.
I'm active and a part of, is that when you come in as a member in that community, the expectation is that you will actively try to contribute or enrich the conversation, contribute to or enrich the conversations with others.
Yeah.
And so that sets an expectation and a guideline for people coming into that space. I've been seeing this in my consultancy work too, with some of the organizations I work with now, that they don't even necessarily want to call it a community membership.
Oh.
They want to call that person a participant or a contributor or a supporter of the space, because even in some cases you're asked to apply to become a member
Hmm.
for the community. And so
Right.
again, those are all markers of value, and it's
Hmm.
like they're brand promises that if I join this space, there's a little exclusivity to me being here. There is a moat or a wall around this place that means that not everybody gets in, not everybody gets to join. And I think I got to see this with several communities. Again, I keep coming back to Fractional United because I'm very active, in that space. They recently went to a paid model for that, and they had always had uh, some requirements to become a member of that community even from the outset. So now you have to pay a little bit. It's not a lot, but you have to pay a little bit to be a part of that community. But you can't even join that community unless you can demonstrate that you've had a leadership role in an
Okay.
organization where you
Yeah.
managed others and where you had an executive level of responsibility with the work that you did.
Right. I think that's a great filter because those who already know how to work with people or how to be in a position that demands leadership, and once you've paved a path already, your contribution would be significantly more impactful than any other individual who is still more, let's say, figuring out, unsure about themselves, and they do not know what they exactly want out of the role that they are looking for.
100%, I agree. Yes.
So when you started like building communities, and I'd say specifically online communities, what do you think? There are companies or there are people those who are focusing a lot on in-person experiences, specifically a lot of digital nomad communities or founders, those who love traveling and they work from different parts of the world. Now they're focusing on in-person experiences versus companies or people those who are building a global or even a local virtual communities. What are the trends that you've seen, or what do you feel works the best? What model is the best?
I mean, it's hard to state that there's a best model, but
Hmm.
it's interesting to see the pendulum swing back and forth. Obviously, when we were going through the global pandemic around COVID, everybody leaned hard into virtual community spaces, and I
Yeah.
think that there was a big explosion of growth in community platforms starting to thrive more, and more community professionals being hired. It was sort of around the same time as that blockchain took off, and
Yeah.
cryptocurrencies and NFTs, and so there was more hiring of community professionals for that because everybody was going on a Discord server,
Yeah.
for community building as well. And then as soon as the Bitcoin market kind of went flat, and
Hmm.
then or at least people became more disenchanted with it, and so it lost its hype. And when COVID started to fade, people swung back to swing. I don't know if swing's not a word. They swung back into in person. And so, like, especially with the events management industry, where they were leaning heavily into virtual events because they didn't have an option to do anything else during COVID. After that, they leaned heavily back into in person. Personally, I feel like the strongest communities take advantage of both. Like I am and have been a huge proponent of hybrid style communities where
Hybrid
there
style.
is a live component and there's a virtual component. And I think that goes back to some of my earliest experiences with communities before I even did it professionally. I was part of an online game community, and this was around 99, 2000. Early experience with discussion forums. They were using Tweaky, I think, at the time, and they were using a vBulletin. vBulletin
Hmm.
was the discussion forum. Very engaged gaming community. And for anybody that is involved with gaming, you understand like that people are quite passionate about their games. They want to talk
Yeah.
strategy. They want to do role playing, within the discussion forums. There are hot discussions about rules and changes to the game, things like that over time. And so there's a lot of stakes around that. I think sorry, I lost the thread of the question. Can you remind me of that again? I kind of went off on a
Yeah,
tangent.
like, I mean, what do you think is the best? As you were talking about, the best mode is hybrid, that you
Yeah,
believe it should
thank
be a
you.
mix of.
I've got the thread again. So old man syndrome. I think for me that lesson really came through in that early experience
Yeah.
because all of us met at one of the big live gaming events I think it was in Milwaukee at the time. Now it's in Indianapolis, but Gen Con is the biggest online game convention or the biggest live game convention that's out there. So people that I had been interacting with for several years, I finally had the opportunity to meet in person, and it was amazing. And so I got to experience firsthand like the joy of connecting with people that you got to know in an online context, and you meet them in person, and then when you meet them online again, it just deepens that relationship. And I have friendships that have continued to this day because of connections that I made in that early community setting. And I think it can work the opposite way too. People meet first in person, and then they go abroad, and the internet connects us. I think that's the original promise of what this whole internet thing was supposed to be in the first place.
Yes, I think I do agree with you that it builds a sense of belonging and you connect with the person better is because you've seen them. However, now I also believe that the VR space, in that space, it is a very different experience of building communities, is because you're not sharing your original name. You are very active on Discord or places like VR chat, but you live a complete alternate life in a VR space. You might be a software developer in your real life, and you are this big demon avatar who's roaming around in different spaces, and nobody would like to talk about, oh, this, hey, this is me. And very few influencers would be like, hi, this is me in real, and this is me in the VR space. So do you think that in the online community space there would be an intersection of metaverse and the people IRL, or people would move more towards this experience since they are getting to live an alter life, or like, this is my alter ego and come meet me and I don't want to tell you if that's me. So what do you think? What is the future in that space?
Well, this is a topic that I love, and I think it relates back to that early gaming experience that I had. It was not a VR game; it wasn't a virtual world
Right.
that I was engaged in, but it was a highly interactive, proximity based text chat world that we were in. And so all of us had personas and characters that we were playing. In fact, it was a very role play heavy environment
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I was in. And as anybody who knows me, I'm a huge gaming nerd. So like I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons back to the 1980s. So like I I I have that personality that I can become addicted
Yeah.
to those settings in those worlds. And it was very compelling to have that. I think that it's something, first of all, I think we need to guard our mental health around. But I think that there is tremendous potential benefit
Hmm.
to having VR spaces where you may be expressing different elements of your identity. I think that there's a really interesting relationship between who we present as in person, or maybe
Yeah.
virtualized interview like this, versus how we might appear in a more anonymized environment where we choose an avatar for ourselves,
Yeah.
where I'm Racian Daguerre, the battle master, 18th level, in the world of Kryn, or whatever, right? So I think that there's healthiness when you have a safe space where you can
Yeah.
express a different identity about yourself that lets you explore and potentially grow.
Yeah.
And they call, I think the clinical term around that is identity bleed. Like
Hmm.
you experiment with versions of yourself in these different online contexts, and
Yeah.
you may take elements of that back into your own personality to be healthy. Now, of course, to be sure, there are a lot of negatives that can go with that as well, which is why I mentioned, you need to guard your mental
Yeah.
health around these spaces as well. But I find that incredibly exciting. I think that we're community technology is going in the not distant future, I think that there will be further movement away from text-based communities, like text as the central metaphor, and more in the form of video or virtual worlds where people can interact. Because I just think like it's breaking down an additional barrier to connection by having a virtual world where there is a sense of space and proximity and touch, sight, sound. That it's much richer than me reading text on a virtual screen.
Absolutely. And why do you think that the community space, even I believe that, and feel free to be the devil's advocate if we might disagree on that. Building a community or being in a community space is the hardest one to crack. Is because you might have, like, I've been part of communities which have 20,000 members and there are 200 active members, and that which like 1% of it. And those 200 active members are running the entire show, and that's 20K in capacity. Now, that's a free group, of course, there is no skin in the game of other members. However, when I look at a lot of communities out there, very few people out of the total capacity run the show, get people, and are the trailblazers of a community. Why? And still, I could not come across any business model, any book, or like this code that if you implement that, you would have more than 85% members engaging, and this would happen and that would happen. So, why do you think this space is one of the hardest to crack? And still, people are having companies doing things, they have case studies, but there's no one proven model to success.
There's not, because there's no one proven model to building a civilization either, right? There is something innate within us that we, since Neolithic times have banded together and formed villages and gotten together for the purposes of survival. I think where it's tougher to crack in online spaces is those challenges are not, they're most often not related to survival. And so like in other conversations I've had like this one, I've referred to what I call like the woolly mammoth effect. And the woolly mammoth effect is, in early societies, we're banding together because there's this woolly mammoth in our neighborhood that is trampling everybody and causing a ruckus, and we're all starving. And you know what? Let's all get together, stab it with pointy sticks, and have a meal. And we now realize that we could do this together. And whereas if we tried to face this massive threat alone, to life and limb, we would not survive. But now we know we've done this. Let's do it again. And again, over a course of time, you suddenly become the cult of the woolly mammoth. And that becomes central to the identity of that group. It becomes part of the community. In a modern digital context, what's
Right.
the woolly mammoth? Like having an online community dedicated to being a CPA or working with a particular kind of accounting software.
Yeah.
That's not a woolly mammoth. That's a nothing. So unless you can attach it to something that's close to someone's personal or professional identity, where
Hmm.
they care about it, where they need it, you're gonna have trouble cracking the code to do
Yep.
that. And so I think there's a notion, and I think it's a right-headed notion among startups and enterprises and nonprofits alike,
Yeah.
that we need some space to
Hmm.
engage our members to do that. But connecting it to the woolly mammoth is the challenge to make it happen. And so I think that's why we have trouble cracking it. But we know we want to form villages around, the software we use, the causes we are associated with, the health situations that we're facing. Like they're all good reasons to come together. But the ones that are the most evocative tend to be the things that are existential threats to us. And the next layer out is the professional connection, like, or the personal connection. Like, is this something that's tied up with my identity? So like, to go back to the earlier example around the gaming community that I belong to, we had all formed an identity around being gaming nerds around this particular setting, and that we loved that setting and we helped engage in world building around it. So that's something that
Yep.
all of us were very passionate about. That was
Hmm.
a woolly mammoth. People who are trying to quit smoking or vaping, one of the communities that I serve as an operations and strategy fractional, those people are trying to quit an addictive substance to save their lives. And so the people that belong to that community, when I talk to them on a regular basis, will say, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have this online support space for
Right.
myself. So that I mean, I think that that's the nut to crack that is very challenging for organizations, and it's more so again because it's so easy to join all of these different communities. Like which space do I join? There are three places where I can go to play these games. Which game is most interesting to me? There are three places I can go to deal with this health challenge, for myself.
Yeah.
Which one is most resonant
Which one's the one?
with me?
Yeah. What if I put a heavy barrier to entry and make that space a premium space? It could be application process is difficult. It could be a higher fee to join, or the members over here are this, so you need to qualify for this. So if I add different qualifiers, which makes it premium, so now even if you have three choices, deep down you know that if I want to go here, I gotta do something with me, change something in myself, or apply in a way that I get selected. Does that work? Because I have increased the barrier to entry now.
I mean, it can. I think it's all in the framing of the value of what's in it for me to join this space. What can I expect as a likely outcome? What's expected of me in that space, and is it something that I think that I can give? That I have the
Yes.
time, energy, or talent, to offer for it? Because again, this gets back to like why it's so difficult to do these things. Yes,
Yes.
you can create all of those barriers to entry. You can create the premiums around that, and then you can wait around for months waiting for enough people to join to make it worthwhile to be that space. So it
Yeah.
becomes this difficult question of like, how much do I open it to begin with? Like, how do I open the space and nurture it? It's kind of like trying to, if you've ever tried to start a campfire with just a couple of pieces of wood, rubbing them together. There's a lot of effort involved with doing it. There are probably some tricks to concentrating that heat. And that's what
Right.
we
Right.
do as community builders. Our job is to concentrate the heat and to create that spark of flame and then nurture that into something that is warm and welcoming. How about that?
Absolutely. It's then the task of the person who's building the community or the team to ensure that people come in. There is a great, very famous creator on the internet called Chris Donnelly, and he runs this Creator Accelerator program. And most of the people in the online business coaching space or people who run programs hide their pricings. Whereas if you go to his website, you would see that the price is approximately $6,000 and it's upfront placed on the page that this would bring you results. These are my 100 testimonials. This is a price. Join the waitlist. We open the cohort on this date. And that changes the entire game. And he's doing that is approximately or even more than $1 million business. So, one thing I feel is adding on to that is because he himself has an audience of more than 1 million people following him on LinkedIn, which is an added advantage. So,
Yes.
that could be done. What is your opinion on people, those who want to run community based or cohort based programs wherein they do not have that kind of audience, but they want to make an offer which is a high ticket offer, like something which is a 4K, 3K, any amount you say, and they want people to join in. Is it viable? Should that be done? Or there's something different to it?
Well, you can't just snap your fingers and have it be done, right? Of course. So if you don't have the luxury of 1 million followers on
Yes,
TikTok or whatever platforms
platform.
you happen to be active with, then you have to be a little scrappier and you need to think about scaffolding up your offerings in ways that you can get your first customers in the door. I'm a big believer in scaffolding and building momentum. So I think too many people will tell you, like in this, I see this in a variety of businesses. I've seen it applied to community. I've seen it applied to consulting, generally, where, the idea is like you should, yeah, don't undervalue yourself.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be charging less than $400 an hour, for your work. Yeah, maybe in an ideal world, but you need to be aware of the market. You need to be aware of your reach. You need to be aware of what you need to make as an amount. And so, like, I appreciate the work of people like Austin Church, who wrote the book Free Money. It's not affiliated. I just happen to know the guy, and I think he's good. Who talks about like working as a freelancer, how you need to know what your starting point is, what's your bottom line of what you need to do to make the lifestyle you have work. And so you need to kind of get over yourself and not set up unrealistic expectations for what you can earn at the outset. Focus on winning that first customer. Try to take every barrier out of the way to getting that first customer. Turn that first customer into a testimonial. Turn that first customer into a second customer. Then you can start to build. I think that if you've got a great offering, it may grow very, very quickly. Or you more likely will need to pivot and change up, what you're offering over time,
Yeah.
and see that grow. And again, this is one of the reasons why I started the Community Consultants Collective, because when I started doing this, there weren't a lot of people working in online community strategy. There were a handful of us, and we were all sort of doing our own thing and
Yeah.
figuring it out as we went. And I wanted the CCC to be a space where we would all be support for each other and could offer perspective, advice, ideas, and a way forward, and not have people feel so alone and disconnected in that whole process.
This is something that you need to ponder upon and be like, okay, this and that. When you actually started, I would love to know your motivation, because the entire Community Consultant Collective has some amazing community consultants from around the world. Yet you were running this initiative without any membership fee, providing visibility to other consultants in the space. What is the motivation, or why not for profit and not running a high ticket offer or something, because you know how it's done?
Yeah, so a couple of reasons go into this, and it's not that we would maybe never charge anything for the work, but I think that at the time we started it up, everyone was coming off of the community high, I'll call it, from COVID times, and there were a lot of people being downsized in the industry. They were out of a job. Corporate entities were jettisoning marketing, community, recruiting professionals left and right. And so it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel on message to charge people to join the group and belong. And plus, we weren't sure if it was viable, to do. At the time, Deb Shell was the person who started the work with the CCC, and then she graciously allowed me to kind of take up the torch and go forward with that. But I mean, we built it as a resource first, and we weren't sure that it was ever going to be anything more than a clubhouse for those of us that did consulting work to hang out. But then I think we saw that there was viability for it, and we're at about 130 members now, and we continue to get maybe 2 or 3 or 4 new people a week who join the group worldwide. So there is a slow growth rate, but it's what I would expect for our industry. I
Yes.
think that I haven't applied any kind of membership fees. Well, first of all, because we're a board-driven organization, and although I'm the elected president this year, there may be another next year who has a different vision, for the way that it moves forward. But we decide as a team if it makes sense to have an offering or do something. Like one of the things we thought about within the past year that came up as a topic is, do we go after RFPs? Customer has asked us to bid on a project. Does the CCC as an entity, does it act like an agency and put together a group of independent community consultants to go after a project? We've tried that 3 times now. None of the 3 times did that work, because there were too many factors to be able
Mm.
to work in with it. And with RFPs, like personally, I've always despised RFPs. In my core, feel that they're a waste of time. Every time I've done one, I haven't
Right.
had a good outcome with them. So we just decided as a board, no, we're not going to go after that. We're going to really focus on sustaining the organization with sponsorships from
Yes.
platform providers. And we might do charging for certain events or programs. We're coming out with we actually are about to come up with a research piece on community consultant salaries that we will sell to outsiders if they're interested in understanding, as an enterprise, what do I have to pay to have a consultant come in and help me, either fractionally or on an hourly consulting basis.
Yeah.
We've got the data around that now that
Absolutely.
we can provide. So we haven't gone that route to monetize it, because I think that for me personally, it's about trying to leave this space in a better place than I found it. Not that I'm leaving anytime soon, but I'm entering at least the middle of the 3rd quarter of my career right now, and I feel like I've been reasonably successful with things that I've done, and I want to.
Yes.
I want to make this profession more welcoming, especially that independent path, because I've gotten a lot of joy from it, and I get to meet awesome people like you in the process.
Thank you for sharing that. That's genuinely meaningful, and the ideology of contributing and ensuring that people become the future leaders is something that I admire the most. Which brings me to understand which has been one of the most difficult, as you mentioned that you are now entering into the third quarter of your career, which brings so much of expertise and value on the table. One business case study or one challenge that you were navigating, which you felt was quite challenging, and you had to navigate around that business problem and then work on the community that, okay, this should be the community for this business and this is the benefit. I mean, most of the conversations that I've had with business owners, they do not want a community as an added baggage. They always wanted to drive some kind of return on investment. Could that be getting more beta testers, people paying a subscription fee, could be anything. So, what was that crazy challenge for you?
There have been a lot of them over the years. I think that a common one, I'll share a common one that I've run into in the
Yes.
enterprise space. And one organization comes to mind around it. I won't name it to protect the innocent, but it was in the software and hardware security space that I work with. And I think they were sort of a poster child example of it. They wanted to build an online community, and they hired, I was with an agency at the time when we did it. They, as large enterprises often will that have a lot of offerings or software, they wanted to build a separate discussion forum area for every product that they had.
Okay.
But this was a starting from zero kind of community. And so I think a lot of enterprises will look at existing enterprise communities and say, oh, well, we want that. We want that for our organization. And they think that they can just turn on the structure overnight. But of course, what happens is a challenge when they do that.
Yes.
They end up with a ghost town. There's a skeleton of a community that no one is participating in. People enter the space, they go and look at their area of the space. There's no conversations happening there. They throw up their hands and say, there's nothing of value here. They go away and they never come back again.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty with the space. And I think that the way around that for organizations is to start small and have an emergent design for the community. So you have some initial spaces to get people together for those conversations. Maybe you don't even build the platform out to begin with. Maybe you begin with a series of Zoom calls or Google Meets. Maybe you begin with some live chapter meetings and then offer a way to stay connected via a WhatsApp. To be like there are so many turnkey, easy ways to keep people connected at the moment. And until you build that core group, and I'll call it between 15 and 25 people who are committed and energetic about your cause, your mission, your software, I don't care what it is. Those 15 to 25 people need to see it as their woolly mammoth. That's what they want. You can't have people that are sort of indifferent about it. Is that core. Only then can you start to build out the infrastructure that's there. And that's how I address that as an issue. Identifying those initial people is critical, and it's also the hardest thing to do.
According to you, the best way to start a community, someone who's starting out or someone who has an okayish base of audience, not that great. So how do they start a community, or should they be starting one?
I think they should absolutely be asking themselves, do I need one right now? What do I want out of that space? Because it's not just about what your members want; it's what you need to make it worthwhile for you to run the space as well.
Yes.
There's a Venn diagram here. There's what I need and there's what they need. And then there's the overlap of those goals and how those things intersect. And if you're not fulfilling both sides of that equation, you probably shouldn't start the community. You probably shouldn't, try to do that. But I think that question of readiness, so that's one of introspection. Am I ready to do this? Why do I want to do this? Have I answered those questions meaningfully and substantially as well? How will I know benchmark wise that I am being successful at community? Does it mean that I've had people renew software subscriptions? Does it mean that I've gotten testimonials? Does it mean that my members are solving problems or it's deflecting help desk tickets? Like the use cases for these things vary quite a bit from organization to organization. It may be something as simple as I want to make sure that my employees are embracing the values of the culture that I say that we're all about. And so I'm looking for people, either exhibiting or proclaiming, the value of being a problem solver in our
Yeah.
organization. Maybe that's my core value. Maybe that's the marker that I'm using as the determination of whether I'm successful. ROI is going to vary a lot around that, but having some specific idea of what that is, that's a requirement. You have to have that.
More of like analyzing if you want it and then starting that out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think starting that out, again, I'll say, think about how simply you can start. What's the minimum that you need to start connecting this group of people? I mean, and it's going to vary for different organizations, for different groups, for different preferences. You may find that maybe a Slack is all you need to connect a small group of people and get them started. Or you may find that you need a full blown enterprise platform like a
Right.
Chorus or Gainsight or something like that to do the work. But to it's important to build the right house for people to meet
Hmm.
in. And I do think of a lot of this stuff architecturally. And I know my friend Jillian I always get her last name wrong, but Message from Calendly has training in architectural background. She's going to be giving a talk at Led By about architecture and community, and gave me a little preview of that. And she's going to be on my show sometime this summer to talk about architecture. But I think we increasingly need to think about the virtual spaces we're building in architectural terms. Do they promote connection? Do they promote flow? Do they promote a sense of belonging? If you're deploying Slack for the wrong audience, they're just never going to adopt it. They'll never take it on and use it. And so
Yes,
those two tool
absolutely.
choices matter quite a lot.
Are you platform agnostic or I mean, the conversation I can, like, you don't like, you can choose a platform based on the needs. What would be the top three platforms that you feel right now are changing the horizons in the community space for people?
Changing the horizons. Now that's interesting. So first of all, I don't consider myself totally agnostic. I don't think there's such an animal that exists. Like, we have platforms we've worked with, we've had platforms that we admire, that we think are useful. And so, like, I used to try to position myself early in my consulting work that, I'm above the fray of that. I don't need to pick a favorite. I'm in the ivory tower and we'll just pick what's best for your use case. I I don't go to market that way anymore. I do have partners. If someone goes to the Clock Tower Advisors website, I've got a partners section, and there are easily upwards of I don't know, maybe 10 or so community platforms that I have listed as partners on the
Yeah.
site. So I play favorites, from that perspective, because I know what it's involved with implementing them. I know what their key use cases are. But that being said, like, I track close to 100 community platforms
Hmm.
that are out there right now in a spreadsheet. I think that each one of them has something a little bit unique to what they do. One that comes to mind that I like a lot, which we use for the Community Consultants Collective, is Disco, which, full disclosure, they're a partner of Clock Tower Advisors. But Disco is very interesting because I think they're doing quite innovative things, combining learning management with online community, and uh, they have pretty deeply embraced and incorporated AI, both within the community section as well as within the learning management section, where
Right.
it will suggest to a community manager AI posts that you can do to build engagement within the space. I hardly ever use them, but they're there, and they're actually pretty good. And then there's also prompting to create a course curriculum
Yeah.
within the platform, which I think is fascinating and really easy to build out. But I'll say, I mean, the platforms that are moving and shaking, I think the most at the moment, I think Gainsight's doing some really interesting things in their space. On the enterprise side, I think they seem to be growing, pretty well. Circle is certainly grabbing a lot of market share at the
Yeah.
moment. Those three are pretty interesting to me, but, like, there's a lot of good stuff happening in the space. Even longtime incumbents like Koros, recently acquired, by Ignite Tech. I expect great things, that they're going to incorporate some very interesting AI elements to what they do. They just moved over to Aurora, which is a better version of their community platform than others. Like, I think there's some really interesting good things happening within the technology in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you've classified that these are the platforms that you would prefer. And it's great to see that there are community platforms that are currently here and more are still coming up in terms of different technologies. However, I still feel that all of these platforms are out there. The user adaptation or how comfortable a user is or the tech savviness of a user defines the usability of a platform. I was solving this for someone who built a community on Circle and they was just lost in the platform. They're like, there's no template that I have. I did this and now I'm not able to link things. I'm not able to invite people. I did a public community and now it's a private community. And even I'm like, it's a private because you did clicked on the button private. They said, no, it should be public. And I was like, so the problem is that you want a community, but right now the platform is giving you a lot of pain. Of course, when the
Mhm.
community is built or when the entire that particular platform is built for you or you now know okay this is where the navigation is built, that's easy. But that 0 to 1 on a platform when you're actually building those tabs, building that course, adding on the members, working on the onboarding flows. So what's your opinion on the platform user friendliness?
It varies quite a bit, and I've heard those sorts of stories about other platforms. It's not just Circle, that can
Yeah,
prove
of
a little
course.
confusing or frustrating for those things. I think it's why we're seeing some entrants in the field like School, which is extremely turnkey. You just flip it on. There's not a lot of configuration to do. It's discussion forum, log simple gamification to encourage people to log in every day and participate. And it's a good starter community if you think about that. So I do think that like a key part of the work that I do as a strategist is working with founders, working with leadership teams to understand what they think their members want, and then validating that with the members and really understanding what they need as well. And so until you've thrashed out an understanding of what the founders, what the leadership team needs
Yeah.
from the community, like what are the things you want people to be doing in your community? What does success look like? And looking and then validating with the members to say, like, well, what are you trying to do there? What kind of problems are you trying to solve? What are you trying? You can't pick a platform until you've understood both of those worlds and what their preferences are. And then you start to look at community platforms that have the proper use cases. So, I'm not just going to put up a house, that, is out in the middle of the desert, for people who are, used to living in the middle of a city.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so I think that again, this stuff doesn't happen without the upfront hope, and you can avoid a lot of those headaches. Again, we come back to this full circle. The blessing and the curse is it's really easy to
Yeah.
pick a platform and get rolling with it, but you can end up not knowing what you're getting into in the process.
Sometimes the platform could be a rabbit hole for the person who's building it and the people those who are using it.
Yes, absolutely.
This is very interesting, which brings me to an interesting segment that we do, which is called as 7 questions to fame. It would be 7 questions that I would be shooting as a rapid fire. So let me know once you're ready.
Hit me. I'll try to be brief.
What are the 3 best companies, according to you, which have cracked the code of building amazing communities?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the main community that I spend a lot of time working with, which is the Truth Initiative's X community. They are super powerful and a great place for people to quit smoking or vaping and get evidence-based support from the Mayo Clinic. Been super great organization to work with. I also happen to know and have some long history with Plex Systems, which is a software that was originally created for the automotive industry. They were recently bought by Rockwell Automation, and they are run by the extremely talented Blake Etheridge. And again, super great customer and partner communities
Yeah.
that they built there over time. Highly engaged. Number 3, I'm going to have to stretch my imagination here a little bit. So I'll say, I will say the connective, and this might be a little bit of a dark horse to mention. The connective is interesting. One organization that I belong to for networking that has the monetarily based exchange of currency if you get a deal through them. They don't have a formal community platform, but I would say they have a thriving community because of the way that they're set up. There's strong motivation to be there.
Yeah.
I think they've cracked some kind of interesting code that hasn't been leaned into very much in other spaces. And so I'm very interested to see where they're going and what they're doing as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I would go and have a look at all three of them now.
Awesome.
So, what has been a life changing advice for you?
I could think of a couple, but I'll approach it this way. Something that I've tried to learn to live by is the dictum of just do the damn thing. If there's something you're working on, like don't let it die in committee. Don't try to get it perfect. It's better to point forward, move slow, and forge ahead along the way. And you're going to learn lessons in doing those things. But if you just continue to hesitate and analyze forever, you're never going to learn those lessons.
On point. That is the best thing of like not staying in your head and start doing the thing. If you've ever been a bait of doom scrolling and being addicted by social media, how did you get out of it? Or what was one thing that you told your mind which got you out of that doom scrolling?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's something that plagues all of us that we could potentially do. I think what got me out of it finally was I think the presidential elections just broke my brain around things here in the U.S. And not to get, I'm not going to get political about this, but I'll just say that the rabid news cycles and the tendency to keep throwing out clickbaity headlines or the next doom scroll worthy post that people see. When I came out of the other side, like particularly the second election here, I was just done. I said, you know what? I just can't. It's toxic to feel yourself being drawn into those realms. I've always kind of guarded myself against flame wars or getting drawn into big online fights about things. But the doom scroll side of it is the more passive side of it, where you're just consuming those things and you're not realizing how it's affecting you health wise. How I just kind of pulled myself out of was a realization, like I can't let this stuff feed me anymore. Like I need to more specifically look at things that actually lift me up as a person and make me feel more creative, more interested. So like if I find myself doing that, I'll go and pick up the latest book that I'm reading instead and try to lose myself in that.
That's beautiful. And what are the 3 favorite books that you would recommend anyone should read in their 20s or 30s?
I don't know about 20s and 30s, but so right now, I'm a big fan of Derek Weeks' Unfair Mindshare, who talks about building communities from an enterprise marketing perspective. He's a chief marketing officer, super smart guy, built and written a lot of stuff. Lais de Olivieri's Hacking Communities, great book. I think it's a great introduction to community building from a social and in-person perspective as well. And just think she happens to be just a brilliant person. She's been a guest on my show a couple of times, and I love her to pieces. And the one that I'm obsessed with right now is Jeremy Utley, and I forget his co-author's name off the top of my head, but a book called Idea Flow, which isn't a community book, but it's a book about ideation and innovation.
I would give it to them. Yes, like next on my reading list now.
Nice.
Which has been the most difficult community platform that you could crack the code of?
That's a difficult one. I'll say Cora's classic because it's got so much capability. But the design, I mean, it's kind of an old school design. It's why they moved to Aurora now as the new version of the platform. But it's got huge capability and potential, for things you can do with it. But it's a little overwhelming to work through it. But the X community that I serve is built on that, and I work in the platform day to day. We're soon going to be moving over to Aurora, and I feel like I've been able to finally, like now that I've been working with it for a while, leverage it pretty strongly for highlighting thought leadership, creating groups that click and work, setting up an advocacy group within the space. Yeah, I've been very happy with what we've been able to build there.
That's nice. And this was an interesting one. Today, there is no clock tower advisory, there's no community consultants collector, and all the assets that you've built, the content that you've put out, the course that you've built does not exist. What would you be doing if you had to build it all from scratch?
That's interesting. So I would probably end up doing 2 things. One would be I might lean more into local in-person community building. I think that it's one of the challenges of our time right now. If you read any Robert Putnam's books on like Bowling Alone and his subsequent, work around community building, or even watch his documentary on Netflix, Join or Die. We're at a low point, I think, globally in like clubs and membership organizations. People belong at a very surfacey level in a lot of groups, as we've been talking about. But the ones that really connect with them and the ones that connect them with people that are not necessarily exactly like themselves,
Yep.
but are maybe around similar interests, we need more of those. We need tons more clubs at the local level to help people feel a sense of belonging and community connection with where they are. The other thing I would do is and this is probably related, I create a lot more in-person gaming groups. I do a lot of role-playing game work. It's a lifelong hobby, and I'd love to run some more in-person games.
Over these many years that you've been working, and there are days where you just don't want to work with the job and be like, I am done and I want to sleep. What built discipline in you?
Wow. So I don't know. I think I've always been wired as a fairly responsible person. My parents raised me in a very structured environment. And so I think that sort of is in my DNA from the start. I think grad school also did a lot to me for that. Like when you start to realize like there's a level of expectation for delivery, that there's a level of sophistication and effort that you put into everything, it's hard to go back and just kind of do things lazily or sloppily. So I think that's had an impact on me over time.
Thank you for that. And the
Yeah.
last one, what is the legacy that you would like to leave with?
The Community Consultants Collective. I think building that as a place where people can get a professional start if they don't want to be working in just one community, if they want to serve many, if they want to have perspective, if they want to have independence in their earnings and what they do. I'd really like to see the CCC become something that is a tradition or a central part of the community profession, that people see it as a viable path and that they've got the resources to be successful there.
Thank you for sharing this. This is actually gold and coming from a lot of hard work, experience, and insight. So thank you for sharing that.
I'm honored to be on the show and to chat with you about this stuff.
And one thing I'd like to understand, which just got in my head, so many people say that the community game is an exponential game. So let's say you start with zero, and it's very easy to go to, okay, a million users, things like that. Now, for me, initially it looked like a dream, and still I figure it out. Do you think it's an exponential game?
I have trouble with that as a concept. Yeah. So I don't think engagement can scale unless there is that sense of belonging that's been created. And whether that becomes exponential, whether it becomes a movement of a million people, really to me doesn't matter at the end. I'm with something that Ram Sethi said a long time ago, which is, give me 1,000. I'd rather have 100 engaged people than 1,000 members or 1,000 followers. So give me the engagement, and let's see if that scales, but that's not necessarily my objective or goal. And I think like you let the community be what it is. I think from conversations that I had with Jillian over at Calendly, that's something that they look at, for their community. Let's not worry about the number of members that we have in there. Let's worry about like how well we're engaging with them. Let's think about the value that they're getting, and then the scaling will take care of itself if you've covered the core of like why people are there and what they're getting out of it.
That's great. Which brings us to a very interesting segment, that is 90 seconds to teach me something. So if I give you 90 seconds, what is something that you would like to teach?
So as I mentioned, I love the book Idea Flow with Jeremy Adley. And if you check him out on the web, he's done some cool TED Talks, and he's talking a lot about AI and being effective with it today. So the thing I'll teach you in 90 seconds is an innovation strategy. And he's a Stanford professor and has done some deep research around innovation. The approach that I would say is, and this is the key of some of his work, is don't focus on the quality of your ideas. Come up with as many ideas as you can, and don't worry about, whether they're good or bad or whatever. Like what they found through the research is that the more ideas that you generate, the more likely it is that you're going to have viable ideas to bring forward. And I think they had the ratio somewhere like 2,000 ideas translates into 5 prototypes and maybe 1 or 2 products at the end of it. But you can't get there just by trying to cherry pick the best idea or by picking the best idea that comes along. So if you're doing a brainstorm session, make sure that you're giving people homework ahead of time, the question to ponder. Think about some things. In fact, I've got one of these today with a customer that I'm working with. When you get together, make sure that there's some quiet introspection time and time to generate ideas on your own. And only then do you bring people together so that you don't end up with groupthink and that you don't fall into the trap of evaluating an idea or stopping at the first round of things that you get out of the event. Was that 90 seconds?
I mean, my mind is not thinking about that, oh wow, this is shape shifting. So many people say that come up with one idea, or even if you have 1,000 ideas, take one and stick to it. Most people don't have 1,000 per se, but they come up with a few and then stick to one. If that fails, go to the other one. I love how it's okay to come up with as many as possible, experiment, build, and then if it doesn't work, shift. Like,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
marrying to that and being like, no matter what, till death do us apart.
Yep. Yeah, he's a big proponent of generating a large number of ideas, running some experiments on the ones that you think have merit, and then pivoting, as you need to. And really smart stuff. And I'll just close by saying he's a huge proponent of using AI as a partner for that idea generation process. Never accept the first answer you get from ChatGPT. It's gonna be different every time you ask it. So keep asking it for at least 3 regenerations of the same idea every time, and you're going to get better results every time as long as you're giving it feedback.
Thank you for that. And I definitely keep that in mind to implement and be like, until unless I don't have a hypothesis, it won't work. Like, there was this founder who received funding only with a Notion page that had 60 users with 60 testimonials and how the product changed their life. And that was all they wanted. Like, that was it that they need. And I was like, wow, you got funding without any pitch deck, without any fancy pitch, just an Notion page with 60 user testimonials saying that this works wonders for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think that's the way it's done, and again, it comes back to just do the damn thing.
yes, just do the damn thing. Well, I'm so honored to have this conversation, and I would definitely love for us to have another episode where we deep dive into strategies and so much. Like, there's so much to learn and so much to understand. And before we part ways, what is one thing that you would like to say?
I would like to say that it's been a real pleasure, first of all, having this conversation with you. I always enjoy talking about topics of engagement online and helping people feel more connected and more of a sense of belonging. If anyone wants to learn a little bit more about the work that I do, you can find my blog at clocktoweradvisors.com. Or if you are interested in hiring a community consultant, or you are a community consultant yourself or thinking of becoming one, I'd invite you to go to communityconsultants.life, and you can learn more about our mission and the work that we do there.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Todd. It was lovely speaking with you, and I'm looking forward to such amazing conversations in the future.
And I look forward to the amazing things that you do. This is just one of the ways that I hope we continue to collaborate.
Thank you.